Oh no, I just want to make sure that it's recording. Where is it recording? Does it tell me? Oh, I know. That's fine. It's fine. Welcome, Nikki. Really great to see you here as a successful candidate for a fantastic new role. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'd love for you to share a bit about your story for those people who might be inspired by it. So tell me a little bit about where you were, before we started working together.
In the spring of last year, so 2019, I was a digital content editor for a reasonably well-known organisation. Quite happy, really loving the work, really diverse, really great bunch of people to work with. And at the time, there were 3 of us, all equally talented, equally experienced, all working really hard. And the organisation decided that it needed a content manager, and we were invited to apply. It was external application as well, I should put that out there, but the 3 of us internally applied. And I was a little bit sceptical, thinking, it could just be manager for manager's sake, a bit more like a paper pusher, a coordinator type role. And I'm very much more creative and strategic thinking. I checked with a couple of my really trusted advocates and colleagues, and they were like, no, you've got to try this. You've got to push yourself. And I studied hard, and I genned up on a few things, and I prepped. And I knew my nerves were going to get to me. I'm not a big fan of interviews. I think they're quite a poor way for organisations in the 21st century to judge someone who may be with them 10, 15 years at quite a senior role, and you're only giving them an hour to shine. It never sat well with me. But I did my presentation, prepped for the day, went in. The room was a closed room, so no light, no windows. It was really hot. Long table with 3 people down the other end, 2 of which I knew very, very well, and somebody from HR, and everything was on scorecards, and everything was very formal and strict. And they started talking at me, and it started getting quite patronising. Nikki, why do you think you're good enough for this role? It is quite a big step up for you, don't you think? This sort of, that's how it felt. And it went on, and it went on. And I could feel myself getting more and more tongue-tied and frustrated. And by the end of it, I actually felt like I didn't want to work for that organisation, even though I'd been there some time and I knew this was a really good cause. And of course, the weeks go by, and you then have the feedback session. And the way that my line manager, bless her, was told to introduce it to me was, Nikki, we have a feedback session. I want to tell you why you scored so low.
Wow.
And looking back on it, I really feel for her, because I don't think she came across as the line manager I know she could be. I certainly didn't come across as the potential content manager I could have been. And I imploded just right there and then. I burst into tears. I had the next day off. I organised to see HR and actually questioned the whole process, because I felt I wasn't the only one going through this. And in fact, speaking to my 2 colleagues, they'd had a very similar, quite stressful, intense interviews. And I don't think there was any need for that. Through that conversation with HR, they put me in contact with their agency that help people through various career and employment issues, which led in a few steps to your good self. And it was at that point, I think we were about a month after the interview, and you found me sort of just dribbling in a corner, didn't you, really?
Bless you. I mean, it's such a common, unfortunately, a common experience in terms of, like you say, I mean, interviews, just an interview on its own isn't really a great way to assess potential candidates. There needs to be generally, I would suggest, far more robustness and other aspects to a recruitment process to really make sure it's, like you say, allowing people to shine, giving them an opportunity to show what they can do.
This one certainly had a presentation and some writing tests, and you had to do a little bit of something beforehand as well to show your actual skill. And you'd actually expect that by the time you're an editor in my field, that's the norm. And I know that the lady that went on to get the job had a subsequent 2-hour interview, which again was incredibly intense, so I found out, with a very senior member of staff who she'd known for years. And she said she came away shaking because she never realised just how awful and impersonal and unhuman and uncaring the whole thing was. And it was because HR was so desperate to be equal and fair and transparent, they almost sort of went too far off the other end.
Yeah, process and kind of due diligence kind of was prioritised over the humanity side, I guess, which is difficult. You know, it's a difficult balancing act for HR to get, isn't it?
And I certainly know people who've been made redundant from the same company since, saying that they felt those last few weeks of the redundancy process were exactly the same. And many of them have worked there many years and really didn't know what to do next.
I mean, redundancy is a very tricky experience, especially when you've been there for so long, you know, not having to navigate the recruitment landscape as it is today, which is quite different. I mean, even in the last few years, it's been transforming with the advancement of technology, you know, artificial intelligence, application tracking systems, all those kinds of things coming together. So it's a really, you know, tricky experience to navigate. I'd love to ask you a bit more about, well, first of all, tell me about the new role.
So thanks for your help. I have secured a role as, I'll have to take a deep breath at this one because it's quite long, the Senior Content Experience Strategist brackets web for a very, very well-known charity, a household name, I'd say.
Just fantastic. I mean, a senior manager role, you know, stepping up, because you were so ready in terms of your talent and your commitment and your ambition. You were so ready. It was just navigating that, that, I suppose, avoiding that imposter syndrome, you know, kind of helping navigate out of that and into the best version of you, which is,
yes.
Tell me a bit
and
more
that's
about
how it felt.
Yeah.
You know, I knew that whole imposter syndrome, and just to be clear, it, you know, you've done the experience and the knowledge and skills, and you just find it really difficult to say, I've achieved this and I do that, because it can come across quite insincere and almost boastful. And I've never sat well with that. I want to be able to describe what I do and what I have achieved in a really honest and human and sort of, you know, successful way, but in a way that feels like I'm sharing a conversation, not I'm better than you because I've done this, which is how the imposter syndrome starts to make you feel. And you start to draw back on it.
So what was some of the most impactful work we did together?
Well, there was quite a few different steps, which surprised me to start with. I mean, I kind of figured there'll be a bit of CV work, and certainly a lot more LinkedIn work than I was expecting. But I think when you said, when we actually came to applying for this particular role, and I was doing the application form, and you were saying, go on LinkedIn, find the particular manager and give her a call. Just give her a call and have a chat. And I have never done that in my career. It's a 25 odd year career, and I've followed what everyone else does. I mean, I've often worked with agencies, recruitment agencies, who do a lot of the legwork. But for me to actually pick up the phone directly to an employer, a potential employer, and go, hi, would you mind having a quick chat about your role?
And clearly you impressed her, because if I remember rightly, weren't you on the phone for like half an hour?
Yes. And she was really friendly and very much up for talking it through. And I knew right then that I needed to get this role, because her whole attitude to the recruitment process was so totally different to so many other organisations that I had looked at. Because obviously, coming out the back of that quite terrible interview, I'd lined up a few more interviews just because I knew I had to get back on the bike, as it were, and keep going. But it's, as you said, you're doing a CV to try and get through the bots, so that some faceless HR person might put you in front of the right person, who then sends you a job description that looks like it's out of the dark ages, and then you do, and you're sitting there going, there's got to be a better way. And this particular lady did that. She actually used LinkedIn to advertise the role. She redesigned the entire job pack and made it much more colourful and full of imagery and really great keywords. And because she's talking to a storyteller, copywriter, content editor, she was really using rich language, lots of inclusivity, lots of quite relaxed, and even in the phone call, I was like, there's a different wind blowing here, and that was really exciting.
That is. I remember when you were talking to me about the outcome of the call, and just to fill people in who are watching this, that is one of my number one top tips. If you're going to apply for an advertised job, I always say, don't even go there until you have had contact with the line manager, the person who's actually hiring that position first. Even, all you have to say is like exactly like Nikki did, quick phone call. Can we have a quick chat about the role? Just got a couple of quick questions. And through that process, you will either know that there's a great rapport, good cultural fit, and you really want to kind of go for that role, in which case it's absolutely worth putting in the hours that it takes these days to complete an application form. If for whatever reason it doesn't feel great, or there just isn't gelling, then you know what, you've saved hours of your life applying for a role that will never be seen by anybody. So fantastic. I love it when
and I have a tip for you, and when I actually sent the application off on the email, I wrote to dear whoever, further to our call that we had the other day, and it was great to speak to you, here's this application and CV as we talked about, just a reminder. And actually I got a personal email back going, brilliant Nikki, I was looking out for it. So I think that's by far been a huge step. And then there was a second one, which was just trying to undo those triggers that set me off way back in the spring at the initial interview, and say, okay, they come in, you've talked about them, you've dealt with them, now let's put you in a whole new space. And just talking me through that, the calming effect and the imagery in my mind and the placing, and all the different atmosphere and environment for my physical body and for my mental and emotional state to be in as I got to that door of that interview, and opened the door and wasn't scared, wasn't full of nervous butterflies, and actually, I'm going to go in and rock this kind of attitude. That was again, I could feel a real momentum at that point.
Just fantastic. And you absolutely did. You went in there and absolutely nailed it. And one of the things that I felt really interesting was that they actually had, if I remember rightly, they had 2 roles, didn't they? And they were encouraging you to apply for the senior role as well, weren't they? Because of how well you'd kind of...
And it was actually a great question, because they're actually building a new team. It was a really great question to ask on the phone call. Here I am, I said, I'm coming out at this level of my career. I want to step up. I'm not sure I've got a foot in both camps. What would you like me to do? And she said, apply for both. So I did. And what you probably don't know is that they were only ever going to have one interview. They set themselves up so they just had 3 members of staff come in, and they were going to do one interview, get it done, move on. Well, a few days afterwards, it all gone a bit quiet, and I was like, oh, damn it, have I not succeeded again. And a phone call came through from this particular manager's line manager above her. And she was on holiday, and she'd said to him, could you just give Nikki a call? Just the one last thing to tick off my list. And we were on the phone 45 minutes, you know.
Fantastic.
And as I say, the week after when she got back, she gave me a call.
Just brilliant, just brilliant. And I also wanted to just affirm, like, you know, so many people have that experience of being really anxious before an interview, and, you know, therefore not coming across as the best version they can, like the nail it kind of version. And so I think it's important to really underline that, you know, I didn't do anything other than help you get into that version of yourself.
Yep.
You had to do all the work around, you know, obviously, performing an interview, you know, submitting a fantastic, I might say, application, and, you know, all the steps that are required. You know, you had to do the doing. Yes, yes, I could review and I could, you know, offer suggestions, and, you know, but you do all the work. But what I think from what you're saying, what was helpful was, you know, having that, you know, person standing alongside you, championing you, cheering you on, and giving you some techniques that would really allow you to access that version of yourself that just nails it.
I refer to you as the bounce board, if you think about it, in that as a creative, you're often bouncing ideas off other colleagues, and when you're on your own writing a CV or an application form and you haven't got that person to just sort of chew the ideas over with, or chew down the phraseology, it can get wrapped around your brain and you accidentally get negative very bloody quickly. Or if you're not, well, you know, if you're not a marketeer or in the promotions business the way I am, where I know I've got to try and craft my words, if perhaps you're in engineering or in payroll or something, and it's just not there, not your skill, it just putting pen to paper could be the scariest thing. And actually then you being the bounce board and giving the top tips and hints and holding hands and going, no, we've had a chat, I can see something in you, keep going, and being the cheerleader was exactly what I needed at that time.
I think so many people need that. It's a particularly challenging experience. I think these days, maybe it wasn't 20 years ago, but these days, you know, it's no longer, you know, send a printed CV to an advertised job in the local paper. You know, it is so much more sophisticated, so much more to navigate. And I'm really thrilled that I was able to, you know, play a small part in your journey of stepping up into that, you know, next big role that you're so ready for. You're going to absolutely nail it when you arrive. I just know it. And I really want to thank you for your comments so far. I do have one other question, which is, if somebody was kind of on the fence, not sure whether or not to work together, what would you say to them?
I actually had this at work. One of my other colleagues was so interested in how I had managed to overcome what had clearly been a really challenging time in my personal and my mental health. And she was curious as to how did you get over this? And I went, well, I had Ali, my careers coach, my careers counsellor. She's been championing me. And my friend went, I'm at a bit of a crossroads myself, and I'm kind of wondering, you know, quite what to do with my career. Do you think she'd be of any help? Absolutely. Even just a couple of sessions, just chewing it through, like I said, the bounce board with somebody who knows what you're going through and understands what you're up against. Not just a husband or wife or family member or best friend or what have you, because they're in a different business or they have different skills. Or Ali's background, your background, brings to that conversation a clarity and a direction and a vision that I wouldn't have been able to get from anybody else. And I think that's really, really useful, like I say, in this atmosphere where we're all really trying to step up and do more and be our best selves. We need that person behind our backs and just getting us over the line.
Oh, and I was just so honoured to be that person for you. Really has been an absolutely extraordinary fabulous experience working with you and just seeing you unfold and flower and be taken seriously as the, you know, as the senior professional that you are, you know, with the bags of experience that you bring. It's, you know, it was a real shocker to think that an employer wouldn't take that and just run with it or let you run with it. What a waste, you know. So I know there's a lot of people out there who feel like wasted talent, who feel they've got more to give, but they're, for whatever reason, not being given the opportunity to do that. It is always worth looking outside of your organisation or looking to another area in your organisation and see what opportunities are available there. Thank you so much, Nikki. It's just been such a pleasure. You know, sharing your story is really making a difference to a lot of people, I think. So thank you so much.
I'm so glad to help, even in a small way.
Thank you. I'm going to stop recording now. How do I do that?